Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus the Trident Realm. This battle was fought at 1950-ish points and the scenario was Plunder. So let's talk about why I said it was 1950-ish points. That's really just because my opponent and I are both practicing for a tournament called the Emerald Dragon GT. That is it's a standard Kings of War event, so you use Clash 2019 and all those rules, but you also get a free dragon that the TO has valued at about 340 points, and then the rest of your army is a 1950 list. So these are the dragons real quick. I've gone over them before in a previous video I did about them, but if you want to see them, just pause now. I am going to push on to the dragon that both my opponent and I chose, which is Nyx. So in my previous video, I said that Shenron I think is the best dragon and sort of the obvious choice. Mostly I mean that in terms of like, are you trying to build an army to win this event versus are you trying to add a dragon to your army? I'm not sure if I said that in the previous video. So if you're trying to build a dragon, or if you're going to choose a dragon to just add to an army you already have, several of them have uses, and in fact Nyx is probably my favorite dragon out of the bunch. I think she's probably the most interesting. So let's go over Nyx's rules real quick. Starting out, we have a 75 by 75 base, speed 9, melee 3+, defense 5+, 7 attacks, and a dash 17 for nerve. Then for special rules, we've got brutal, fly, regen 4+, stealthy, and thunderous charge 2. So next up we have the special rules for the dragon, which is Fog of Pain 10, which is a wind blast spell that does damage and also has piercing 2 for that damage, so pretty good. Then we've got Mind Rot, which is enemy units within 6 inches essentially suffer from weakness, so they're -1 to wound your units. It does not stack with weakness itself. Then we have Decay, which is your opponent may, you can have your opponent reroll 1 die per game. So if they boxcar you, you can go reroll one of those 6s to try to get it lower, or if they hit you with, say, a Abyssal Dwarf Mortar, you can go, nah, I think we're gonna reroll that to see if we can not get that 5+. So it's a pretty good rule. It's not as good as Shenron's, obviously, because turning off double 1s is just significantly better than turning off double 6s or causing a double 1, in my opinion. But anyway, pretty good dragon. I think her stats are a little weak because that 7 attacks and then 75 by 75 base and only Thunder 2 is not very good. But Fog of Pain is a great range attack. Wind Blast 10 with Pierce 2, that's amazing. So yeah, definitely a bit of a mixed bag where you want to get her close enough to get that Mind Rot ability going, but not so close to be charged. So it's a fun little balancing act. So anyway, my opponent and I both chose Nyx, and I'll go over what I think about that when I go over the list. So first off, we have my opponent's army, which opens with a troop of Thule with the Dwarven Ale. Then we have 2 hordes of Depth Horrors, 1 with the Brew of Strength, a regiment of Gigas with the Staying Stone, a horde of Water Elementals with the Wine of Elvenkind, Ector, a Naiad Envoy with Aura of Heroism 2 and Teleport 3, the Siren, a Thule Mythicin with Banechant 2, Mirrodin's Amulet, and Surge 7, and finally 2 Knuckers and 1 Kraken. So first off, let's talk about the list. I think it's a good start for an army, for a Trident Realm army, going up to that 2250 value, especially if you don't want to paint a lot of models. I've run Depth Horrors, but I've run a similar list in the past. I still don't like Wine of Elvenkind now that it gives you the -1 unit strength, but I can see the appeal of it. It's still a great combo to be able to sidestep and then pivot so you can flank charge people with that Surge, but it's not my favorite thing. The rest of the army is pretty good. Ector and the Siren, I think Ector is an auto-include for Trident Realm, so if you're thinking about starting the army, look at Ector, and especially once you start considering that Nyx is in this army. So Nyx offers quite a bit in both having the regen rule and decent defense and stealthy, so even better than the defense of Trident Realm as a whole. Trident Realm tends to suffer against shooting heavy armies. It doesn't handle it very well because they have low defense, so their plan is to just take some damage, some chip damage, and then regen it back, which they need that ensnare rule to really get the maximum efficacy from. But against shooting, they suffer. Now, I don't know, or Nyx adds a bit there in that Nyx herself is very difficult to take down due to shooting. And then shores or enhances their strength in melee by going, not only are you -1 to hit them in the front, you're also -1 to wound them, just period, if Nyx is there. So pretty cool. And then lastly, Nyx combos very well with that Fog of Death rule. Her Wind Blast combos with Ector, both of them can Wind Blast you and damage you with that Wind Blast, and then the Siren can drag you around. So there's a lot of movement shenanigans on top of the fact that with Nimble Water Elementals in Surge, you can get some really fun combos going on. So all in all, I think it's a solid list. There are definitely changes I would make. I think depth horrors are not good in a 1950 point environment. It's just too tempo oriented, especially when everyone's going to have a height 4 monster with at least a pretty decent ranged attack. So depth horrors just sort of melt to that. But anyway, let's move forward. I like the list, obviously. Starting with my 1950 version of Empire of Dust, we have the Mummy's Revenge formation, which of course involves a Cursed High Priest with heal 4, always heal 4. Then we've got 2 regiments of mummies, one of whom has a healing brew, and then both the mummy regiments gain Elite and Vicious in that formation. Then we have a Horde of Revenants with Brew of Strength, a Horde of Revenant Chariots with the Caterpillar Potion, 2 regiments of Chariots in general, Mortibris, Double Bone Giant, and a Soul Snare. So this list, one, is 45 points down, and I did play it this way, so I just thought I'd finished it. I have no excuse besides the fact that I've had an 80-hour work week, so I was pretty tired by the time I was playing this game. But anyway, it's all right. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to play my Empire of Dust. I still don't think that they do very well the lower points you go, just because Empire of Dust is a very high value army. When I mean value, when I say value, I mean a lot of people say grind army. I would say value. So they're very good at grinding, but they cost a lot of points because of that, and sometimes that can cause issues with low drops, and the lower drops you have, the more likely it is that you will just get spiked in damage early on in the game, and that can just be disaster. So anyway, I think the list is pretty good. I have some thoughts on how to change it in the future, but yeah, we'll move forward. Oh, and then my idea for Nyx in this army is it's pretty simple. I really like having the Wind Blast. Wind Blast damage is great, and again, getting that -1 to wound bubble onto a grind army is just amazing. Bone Giants and Mummies are very, very, very difficult to take down with that, and a Horde of Revenants as well if I choose to keep Nyx around them. So it's just pretty good, and then I have a lot of healing in the, well, I don't have a lot, but I've got 9 points of healing in this army, so I can heal up Nyx if I need to. It just combos well. So anyway, that's the idea. And here's the table. So let's talk about the scenario real quick. Plunder is a pretty simple one. You start off with an objective, or I'm sorry, a loot counter in the center of the table, and then each opponent takes it in turns to place a loot counter that has to be on the center line of the table, and then has to be more than 12 inches away from another loot counter. So it ends up with just loot counters down the center of the line. Then each player takes turns choosing one of the loot counters to be worth 2 points. So my opponent chooses this one to be worth 2 points. I choose the center objective to be worth 2 points. So those are 2, and then these 3 black objectives are worth 1. So that's the scenario. We're just trying to grab them and hold them at the end of the game. Highest victory points wins. Let's go over the terrain real quick. So, actually, before I say that, it is interesting because these loot counters really do mess with this game in general, because my opponent has a lot of Wind Blasts in their army. Both of us have Nyx, but Nyx, Ector, and the Siren cannot Wind Blast units that have loot counters. They're just not targetable. So that is a big deal. And on top of it, I'm running an undead army, so I also cannot surge while I have loot counters. So just a bit of a weird one here. Let's talk about the terrain. So starting over here, we have a height 6 forest. Right above it, we have a height 2 hill. Then right down here between the 2 loot, we have a height 0 graveyard. Below that, we have another height 2 hill with a height 1 obstacle attached to it. Above it, we have a height 3, I think. maybe it was height 4, but I think it's a height 3-4 house with a height 1 obstacle that's sort of L-ing out from it. Right there, or a 7 if you're weird. Then below that we have another height 0 graveyard. Above that graveyard we have a height 2 hill, and finally we have our last height 6 forest right here. Oh no, we do have one more piece, which is my opponent often runs this as their herdstone, but it's just a height 4 or height 3 impassable. So that's the terrain. Let's go over the armies. So starting with my opponent, these are his water elementals. Always really cool models. I mean, Mirsha just makes cool stuff. I believe behind him, you can't see it, is the Thule Mythicon with Bane Chant and Surge. So, oh, and then of course these have Wine of Elvenkind. And then right here, this is my opponent's Nyx model for the time being. Right to its right, we've got one shark person. That is a horde of depth horrors with the regiment of Gigas with the staying stone in front of it. Then we have behind the herdstone kind of thing, this is my opponent's Naiad Envoy for the day. That Naiad Envoy has Aura of Heroism and Teleport. Behind, or to the right of that, we have the Kraken, and behind that Kraken, you can just see her arm poking out, and a bit of, I think, a bit of this. That is the Siren. Then we have a horde of depth horrors. These are the ones with the Brew of Strength. Then in front of them we have the troop of Thule with the Headstrong with Dwarven Ale. And then to the right of those Thule we have Ector himself. Off to the right of Ector we've got both of the Knuckers, and I think that's about it. So moving forward to the Empire of Dust, we start on my right flank. So right here, we've got the 1st Regiment of Chariots. To the right of that, we have the Horde of Revenants with the Brew of Strength. Behind them is the Cursed High Priest in the Mummy formation with Heal 4. This big monster, that is my Nyx for the day. Again, I just grabbed just a big painted dragon-y thing. So, yeah. And right in front of her is my Soul Snare. To the right of the Soul Snare, we have both regiments of mummies sitting there. I believe these ones are the ones with the brew, or the healing brew. Right between them, this is Mortibris right here. Not a penis. Get your mind out of the gutter. Then to the right of those mummies, we've got 2 bone giants. And then to the right of that, we have my horde of chariots, and finally my regiment of chariots. So that is the deployment. Let's move on to turn 1. So turn 1. Turn 1 goes to my opponent here, and mostly just moves forward. You can see how anemic these armies look, right, at 1950. You folks in the UK must be used to this, but I prefer things a little bigger. So we start out with the water elementals just moving forward. Obviously they did not run and do not get surged. Nyx runs over to join them. Just to get some shooting onto these chariots, since this chariot regiment is not within inspiring. I only have 2 inspiring sources in this list, right? The dragons do not have it. So I have both my inspiring. I chose to not inspire this regiment of chariots because it's pretty hard to kill a regiment of chariots on turn 1. But anyway, Nyx moves over there just to wind blast it back. We've got the Gigas advancing forward onto the double loot counter with some depth horrors to back them up. The Kraken just sort of stays behind the terrain, staying out of range of my... I think the point was to make it so my Soul Snare has to move onto this hill to shoot because, yeah, so my Soul Snare has to advance forward to get any of these height 3 or above targets, which are the Kraken, Nyx, and then the Knuckers. The rest of the army, yeah, it just moves forward and keeps that battle line, and that's about it. So let's go with my opponent shooting. Like I said, Nyx chooses to shoot into this chariot regiment that I've got slightly off picture here, or off frame, and with 10 shots, nails 8 of them and then wounds with all 8. So that is a pretty lucky draw, and again, in lower point games, you just get real big spikes because of that. So anyway, these guys have 8 damage on them, so that it puts them at a 7 to kill. And then Ector, or my opponent, then casts Teleport onto Ector. Ector gets thrown up about here, and that's when my opponent, originally he wanted to put him into the woods, which is smart, but Ector does not have Pathfinder, so cannot fly into the woods, I do not believe, using Teleport. So instead just teleports Ector to about here. here. Then Ector chooses to Wind Blast these chariots. I think Ector has a Wind Blast of 7 or 8, and hits with 5. I think, yeah, 5 of them, wounds with 3. So some pretty good wind blasts going on. Both my chariot regiments are completely out of position. And yeah, so here is the action shot. These chariots facing off against Nyx the Mighty, apparently. And here's the end of the turn. So you can see these chariots got knocked back. They do not die, thankfully, but the other chariots just get destroyed. I think my opponent rolls a 10 or 11 on that break test too, so just some very high rolling. And we move forward onto turn 1 for the Empire of Dust. Turn 1 Empire of Dust, I do have to make up some ground here, just because losing 100 points or over 100 points turn 1 it's just a big deal in these smaller games. So first off, I choose to not advance with my chariot horde, just because there's no reason to. If Nyx wants to charge into me, I'm not sure Nyx can, because Nyx only has an 18-inch charge, not a 20. So I don't know, maybe Nyx can, but even if Nyx chooses to do that, it's only got 7 attacks, and then I will just surge a giant into it. So not the best plan, and I'm staying out of the charge range of these water elementals. So again, they also cannot surge into the chariots, just because the the chariots, that would be too far. So I'm over 14 inches away, because I believe the Thule Mythicon only has surge 7. So that's the plan. I move both my giants forward. I'm not worried about water elementals into the flank too much, just because to get that to work, my opponent will have to walk over and onto this obstacle. So even with a 7-inch movement, the corner will still be touching this. So yeah, it's a long surge, and to even get it, they will surge into me on a hindered charge. So that's what, like 36 attacks on 5s and 3s. And I have my Inspire there. I'm just not super worried about that. And then Nyx cannot charge into me because there's not enough room to land, and Nyx is in my front. So that's what I do there. The other giant chooses to let Nyx charge him if Nyx wants to, because again, it's only 7 attacks with Thunder 2, and then I will just send every mummy and giant I have into it. So, come at me, bro. We've got this. Speaking of the mummies, they advance forward just as far as they can. I take my Soul Snare and put it onto the hill, which is, again, yeah, the whole point of this is because, again, I lost a unit turn 1, so I want to make up that tempo loss by putting the Soul Snare and then Nyx, because I have a pretty easy target of these Depth Whores here, because I'm wounding them on 2s with both of them. That's going to be 20 shots on 4s and then 2s. So pretty good odds that I nail some decent damage there. I could even... Mortibris could have gone onto the hill, I guess, if I had taken these these mummies off of it. I don't know. But I chose to not get Mortibris into the fight, because whatever. So that's the plan. I choose to leave these chariots back, because I don't see a point in advancing forward into Ector's charge range. And if one of these guys wants to come after me, they can do it. I believe that this Knucker has picked up one of the loot tokens, so just sort of sitting back there. I advance forward with my Revenants, because again, I can't be charged by the Kraken. I'm out of the 14 there, but if Knuckers and Ector want to come into my Revenants over here, go nuts. So that's the plan, and I keep this wizard back. I am within 6 of these chariots, so if they don't get wind blasted, I will have some Inspire on them, and of course I'm going to go for that heal. So in my shooting, first off, Nyx and the Soul Snare roll pretty poorly, and I roll pretty poorly to hit. I think the Soul Snare only hits like twice or 3 times or something. It's pretty bad, but Nyx makes it up, and I end up with 7 wounds onto the Depth Whores, which is under what I would have wanted by about 1 or 2, 2 being the more common. And yeah, so I end up just pushing them over there, and if I roll a picture back, I also, when I go for this heal onto my chariots, I heal 1 because, it just happens. I miss this Bane Chant, and then I choose to make my chariot shoot into the water elementals, and I do 1 or 2 wounds there, which again is not enough for a check. So at the end of the turn, it looks like this. I've pushed the Depth Horrors back due to Nyx and done essentially nothing else. I don't have that much shooting in this list. I believe these chariots shot off. Went for the Thule regiment here and just missed with all 8 shots, so that's what happens with stealthy. But moving forward on to turn 2. So turn 2, Things getting a little better here, or a little bit better for the Empire of Dust, who notoriously have a hard time with Trident Realm because Empire of Dust doesn't have that many units that hit on a 3+. In fact, I can only think of I can't think of any of them that aren't heroes, because even the Worm Riders are 24 attacks on 4s, I want to say. So Ensnare is a very good rule against them, especially in low point values, because it's hard to get flank charges when you're outdropped. So my opponent chooses to not really go for any charges here, which I think is a prudent measure. There's no reason to come into me just yet. I know these these water elementals originally had moved forward, and I was a little confused, and then realized that my opponent had forgotten, or I hadn't told him that these guys have Pathfinder. So I just went over that while he was moving. I'm like, why are you doing that? So he plops him back a little bit to make sure that this giant cannot get a flank charge, and then I get a front charge with chariots. Just kill him off easily. So Nyx moves forward just to be a bit more a better position, just because I can only get one giant into Nyx right now. The other giant can't maneuver past this house. And since I don't have nimble on giants, obviously, I can't even get a surge onto Nyx. So that's sort of the point. And then this is perfectly too thin for a mummy regiment to fit through. So my opponent is playing pretty cannily here, and just keeping me at bay, using the Gigas as a stopgap, right? The Depthors also make a prudent maneuver, and again, I was talking to my opponent during this because he was like, you can't surge with loot counters, right? And I'm like, nope, and you also can't be wind blasted. And so he goes, oh, yeah, and runs over, grabs the loot token or actually looks like he's grabbed 2 loot tokens. Not sure how that happened. Whatever. So grabbing the loot tokens there with these Depthors and making it so I can no longer target him with Nyx, which sucks, obviously. But, you know, it's what happened. I have positioned all my heroes and units sort of in a way where, like, if this giant gets wind blasted, it hits these mummies and stops. This giant can be wind blasted far back, but if he does that, then I can actually get some weird surge charges going. These mummies can't go back because Nyx is in the way. These mummies can't go back because Mortibris is in the way. So, you know, just a little bit of trapping yourself against wind blast, so you don't move. And yeah, on the right side of the field, you can see my opponent, these Thule end up grabbing the 2-point loot counter here, while this Knucker moves into the woods. I think the other Knucker is just sitting over here. It's either sitting over here or fighting these chariots. We'll see in a second. And then Ector just advances into the woods now, just to give him that -1 to be shot. So yeah, here's the action shot 1, which is the whole point of my opponent staying back to make it so I have to move onto the hill to target things with the soul snare, is so the siren can drag the soul snare forward, turning off its shooting, and so on and so forth. So not the best for me, but again, I'm outdropped in this army, and I lost a unit turn 1. I think my opponent has 13 drops and I have 11, so I go down 3 drops, so it's pretty big, meaning that I'm not sure I could avoid this and still feel good about my decisions. So anyway, the soul snare gets dragged forward, not looking good for it. And here's an end of turn shot. Yeah, you can see the Knucker just sitting in the woods there, making it so if the chariots want to charge in, because the Knuckers now have ensnare, I'll be hindered and ensnare. So on 6s, 6s to hit with 8 attacks and then a 3 to wound. Not the best. So that's what happens. Nothing else really happens with my opponent. Oh yeah, here's another thing. Nyx again goes for a shot onto Mortibris, does 6 wounds to Mortibris because Nyx is on fire. And I think Nyx again hits with 8 attacks, but rolls 2 1s to wound me. So yeah, it does 6 damage to me, and not enough to break me though. So that's good. And we move forward onto turn 2 for the Empire of Dust. So turn 2 Empire of Dust, we finally get to do some charges. So first off, on the left, you can see I do take my chariots into the front of these water elementals. I don't really think that they can take it, but I don't think my opponent saw this move either, which is if we roll a picture back, this giant can advance forward without hitting the building. It might not look like it, but trust me, he can. Advance forward without hitting the building, and then pivot a little bit to just be facing these water elementals and end up with a 5-inch, I think it was a 5-inch charge there, or a surge charge there. So pretty cool. It does open up a Nyx flank. A Nyx flank possible if I fail it, but even if I get 1 or 2 surge, the other giant will protect me, because then Nyx will be in the flank, or Nyx will be in the rear of this giant, and there won't be enough room for Nyx to land, so it'll be fine. And that's the plan. Morgana moves forward to get that surge going. I take a triple charge from my giant mummies and both the mummies onto these gigas, and it's mostly just because there wasn't a whole, like, even if I double one this charge by overcommitting, right, I'm going to end up with my mummies in the same place that the mummies are going to be anyway. And I was going to take mummies and just the giant into it, since this giant has nothing else to do. So it just seemed like the better charge. I take Nyx and move over onto the hill over here, just to get my -1 aura going. The Soul Snare can skirt between these units and just walks into the graveyard here. The plan is, again, there's only an Envoy and a Siren back here that can charge me. Envoys, I'm like, well, it's an ASB, so you know it's probably melee 5+, and that's a wizard for the Siren, so melee 5+ or 6+. So whatever, come at me with your 6 attacks at most. We'll see how that goes. This green rock is because Aura of Heroism on my opponent's turn 2 was cast onto this Kraken, so we've got a Rally 1 bubble going on here. So ignore the Kraken for now. The Revenants here decide to take a charge onto the Thule, and yeah, in retrospect, this probably is just not the best idea, because I also take Nyx and I'm going to go for a Wind Blast here. So I could have just Wind Blasted these sharks all the way over here and made it so no matter what I do, since there's an enemy unit here, an enemy unit here, and an enemy unit here, I could have made it so no matter what, I get flank charged by a very dangerous enemy. So not the best plan, but it's what happened. And then I take these chariots and just run into Ector. I'm hoping to do 1 wound, as I don't want the Kraken Maw firing anymore, but it's a hard one because, again, it's 6s to hit and then it's 6s to wound because Ector has phalanx. So yeah, Ector is a real beast. So anyway, we do that. This wizard just decides to run off. I'm perfectly out of 18 from that. From either of these knuckers, so they're not going to be able to get to me, and then I'm within 12 to heal these chariots again, or Mortibrus. So in the end, I decide to cast heal on the Mortibrus, and again I get heal 1, so out of my 8 heal so far, I've got 2. Yeah, but Mortibrus does nail this surge, getting the exact number I needed, that 5, I believe. So I surge into the side of these water elementals, and things are pretty good. Here is an action shot. Well, this is a bit of an action shot. So you can see the mummies and giant do delete that Gigas unit. And here's the thing, I roll so terribly in this combat that I only kill them because I have brutal. So yeah, I actually did need all the mummies because dice happen. When you're gonna roll like garbage, send your entire army at it. And here is an end of turn shot. So things are looking up for the Empire of Dust, but we'll see, because I've taken out the left flank here as the water ellies are gone due to this really nice giant charge. Actually, that giant, I think, pretty much only supplies brutal. I roll terribly with my giant. It only hits like twice, and then the chariots just pick up the slack and mow down those water ellies. So, and by pick up the slack, I mean they roll exactly average. So yeah, I get the water ellies gone, and I get rid of the Gigas here. That's great. And I decide to turn. So I've got my giant flank is exposed to Nyx, and that's because right now these mummies could also get flank charged by Nyx. So I want my opponent to, well, honestly, I want him to make a mistake and charge into the giant, but we'll see what he does. The other good thing here is that these mummies against depth horrors I do not believe have Pathfinder. So when they charge into me, they will end up being hindered due to this graveyard. And then my Revenants here are facing like so. They just never fight anyone in the front due to mostly this horn. But anyway, facing like that to make sure that the Kraken and the depth horrors are in its front. So that's the plan. I do end up with a loot counter on the Revenants due to killing off the Thule, and I end up with a 1-point loot counter on my chariots because they killed off the water ellies who were holding 1. So I have 3 points right now, and my opponent has 3 points as well. And I believe 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have 4 of the. Oh, there's the 5th one. Yeah. So I'm still not sure how this happened, but anyway, moving forward. On to turn 3. So turn 3, yeah, lots of charges going on. So first off, we've got the Thule Mythican. Actually, let's roll a picture back. So yeah, the Thule Mythican right here just walks in front of my giant. It's a tight fit, but in the end, why argue? So my opponent goes right there, goes and tries to get a Bane Chant off onto these Depth Ores because they're crushing 1, but my Nyx is here, so I'm making them my Nyx. 1 to wound. Good puns. So yeah, going for a Bane Chant and blocking up this giant. Then we've got Nyx and the Depth Ores going into the front and flank of the, the flank and front of the mummies respectively. And the multi-charge onto my Revenants is this Kraken, the Depth Ores, and what's his name? Ector, while both of these Knuckers decide to kill off my Chariots. So that's fine. Again, the Chariots were pretty much doomed there, so getting 1 wound through on Ector would have been good, but getting this so Ector has to charge is also fine with me. So that's what it looks like. My opponent does decide to take the Siren forward. I think the plan is to Siren's Call Nyx to turn off all my Thunderous and my Thunderous, Flight, and my Wind Blast, while the Envoy goes into my Soul Snare. And this is when I learn Envoy is a hit on a 4+, because I don't know. So yeah, Envoy goes into the Soul Snare. It's still not the best odds. I think it's ends up being like a 0.75 chance of landing a wound on the Soul Snare, so not the best odds. And we move on to a bit of an action shot here, and here's the end of the turn. So things go very weirdly here. Starting off on the left, we've got the Bane Chant, which does land onto these Depth Horrors. Then the Depth Horrors plus Nyx go and just do terribly. Nyx has 14 attacks, the Depth Horrors have 18 attacks. The Depth Horrors are on 4s, and Nyx is on a 3. But they roll pretty poorly here. They only manage like 7 wounds onto those mummies. So really bad, mostly due to my Nyx just doing work here, so that's good. So yeah, Nyx does work, ends up getting the mummies not killed, and then over here on the right you can see my Chariots are gone. That's to be expected. And then these Revenants take a ton of damage, and again, it's, you know, stuff like Kraken here has, I think, 15 attacks with crushing 2, so but only a 4+ to hit. Unfortunately, my opponent just, again, rolls pretty well on this hit, right? Hit and wound roll, does a ton of wounds to the Revenants, but then fails on the break test, rolls very, very poorly on that. So yeah, my opponent is rolling very, very well on the hit and wounds over here, but then terribly over here. So it's a bit of a weird game. And we move forward onto turn 3 for the Empire of Dust. So turn 3, Empire of Dust, you can see the movement we've got. First off, I take these Chariots and just go, yeah, I want loot tokens, so I'm just gonna go grab that because I think I have the center one, right? I've got a rear charge onto Nyx and a flank charge with my mummies and a giant. I've got this giant going into this Thule Mythican, and it's in the rear because it had to turn to cast Bane Chant, right? So I'm not getting ensnared there. I've got a front charge with Nyx and mummies onto these Depth Horrors. Hopefully that will land that. My opponent did land the 1 wound necessary to turn off the Soul Snare, so it's just sitting there in the graveyard because why not? The Revenants go for a charge onto, I believe, the Depth Horrors, because the Depth Horrors had like 2 or 3 damage on them already, forgetting that they have Ensnare for a second there, but whatever, all these units have Ensnare, and the Kraken and Ector are actually harder to kill, so why not just go into these Depth Horrors. I do position my Wizard here. The idea is that these Revenants are probably dead anyway. I don't really want to go after them to give them Inspiring, because if I do that, I'll just lose the Wizard to some Knuckers. So I don't do that, but I do position myself so I can heal. Losing the Soul Snare's ability, ugh, that is just enormous. This is a very, very bad matchup that I am not playing particularly well. So, you know, anyway. The center looks real good though. I mean, that is, if I don't win this, like, there's got to be a double 1 there, right, guys? the other thing is that you might have noticed that Mortibrus has not healed any wounds, and that is because my opponent asked me if Mortibrus has a regen before he shot them. I said no, and then after he had done it, I went, wait, he does have regen. So this game, I just chose to act as if he failed all those rolls. So I told my opponent he didn't, so I don't take any regens there. So moving forward, we get an action shot of this combat. Yeah, that's a lot of loot tokens there to grab. Once I get through these, I can just turn to the right and then it's game over, right? Well, I double won it. So I actually roll a 3 on this the first time, and my opponent uses their Nyx reroll to make me reroll one of the dice, and I get a double 1. So yeah, that might just cost me the game there. Nyx is sitting on 19 wounds, but does have a regen 4+, so... And but thankfully the other combat, again, I managed to kill that off, and that's because Nyx fails to hit a wound with any attack, and then these mummies are like, what about 10 damage? Because mummies are amazing, obviously. So yeah, these mummies just blow right through those guys, and then because I double won this, it's really ugly. I didn't want... So... Basically, I have to do some weird maneuvers here. Nyx goes forward, right, to protect the mummies because the other Nyx can't fly, at least. So it can't fit through this gap. And then while I'm doing that, I go, well, I'm either going to get double flank charged by Knuckers, or I'm going to get flank charged by a Kraken, right? And the Kraken, at least, has the decision to fight the... could just fight the Revenants instead. So I'm just forcing my opponent to make decisions here. The Revenants do turn around, but we'll see what that does because I cast heal onto them and I heal 1. So now I'm up to 3 out of 12. Pretty good. Yeah. Oh, I think I went for a plus crushing strength onto these mummies. Was it on them? We'll whack a picture back or 2. Or 3 or 8. It's these mummies. Okay, so yeah, I did end up casting crushing onto these mummies because I had nothing else to do with Mortibrus right now, just because Nyx is there. So I'm at crushing 3, knocking down to crushing 2 effectively. So anyway, that's what I do. And over here, yeah, this giant has 10 attacks and hits with 2. And wounds with them, at least. So I end up doing 2 wounds to this Mythicin, and that's what happens. I do get a waiver because I think a Mythicin is a 10-12, so I get that 7 with Brutal. So anyway, not the best dice. And moving forward to turn 4. Turn 4 got a little turned about. Let's just go forward. So here is the combat picture. First off, let's talk about the Nyx. My opponent's Nyx goes into the flank of my Nyx, right? Because of that double 1 there, and regens 9 of the wounds, so still on 10, and only a dash 17. So I could kill Nyx off here as long as my Nyx doesn't die. So the Kraken here decides to go into the flank of my mummies. Seems smart. While we get Ector again. I'm gonna forget that. Ector and one of the Knuckers go into the front, just looking to kill off these mummies. They are at full health because they were attacked before, right? And I ended up regenning almost all those wounds back, and then getting one of the wounds back due to life leech. And oh no, I also popped my healing potion, so I heal all my wounds. I'm back to full, but it's worrisome. The other Knucker here goes into my wounded Revenants, who are sitting, I believe, on like 16 wounds because of craziness and a failure to heal. So yeah, they're not long for this world, I don't think. Even with a Knucker only having 6 attacks, it should be enough. And here is the end of turn shot. So yeah, this Knucker does kill off my Revenant Horde, which is pretty bad because now it's sitting on 2 loot counters. But the good part is that in the center here, you can see nothing else happens, which is the Ector, Knucker, and Kraken combo do not manage to kill off my mummies. They do pretty well, and then I think they do 10 or 11 wounds to me, and then roll that 6 or don't roll that 6 or a 7, so they roll a 5 or a 6, I guess, and don't kill off those mummies, so that's really good. My Nyx basically takes no damage from my opponent's Nyx because, you know, it's only wounding me on a 6, so I think it takes 2. It does turn off its ability to fly and it's thunderous, so that's good, but nothing more. And of course, the Envoy, now it's at like, what, a 33% or 0.33 chance of getting a wound because my Soul Snare is essentially def 5. And again, my opponent managed to nail a wound. In fact, nails 2 of them because why not? So anyway, moving forward onto Empire of Dust turn 4. So Empire of Dust turn 4, I take these chariots. So basically I run over, grab the token, and then change my facing like so. So the next turn I can turn them like this and move over back into the game. I take this giant and go into this Mythicin, which my opponent has now turned around. So it's going to be ensnared now. I choose to get, so I've got some weird charges going on here, which is I've got a giant into the rear of Nyx. That should be enough to kill it off. I then take my Nyx and just advance. No, my Nyx cannot advance at all because it's trapped, right? There's too many enemy units. So hold on, I take these mummies and I charge into this Kraken. So I can do that. And then I have just a perfect line to charge into this Knucker with these mummies, assuming I surge it. So that's what they're gonna do. The Soul Snare looks like it's taking a walk, but that was just because I need to see its base to see what it could do. So it's just sitting there, and yeah, it's not looking great right now, but if I can nail these combats, that'd be really good. I mean, a dead Nyx here. Why is my Nyx not charging? Yes, because my Nyx is too far forward to see that Kraken, so I guess it backed up, maybe? Yeah, it must have. Or maybe it didn't. Whatever. It couldn't charge anything. So anyway, here is the action shot, going for that sweet surge onto that Knucker, hoping to get it, because if I don't know what I do here. So anyway, here is, yeah, we got that surge going, and don't know what this picture is showing off. So let's get, oh, I guess this was my end of turn shot. So end of turn, this Knucker does not get killed off by my mummies. I do manage to waver it though, so that's good. The Kraken also does not get killed by the mummies, does take some damage, so I guess that's okay. This giant does manage to kill off Nyx, my opponent's Nyx, so that's really good. The other giant, again, rolls, I think I only get 7 attacks this round. I only hit with 1 and I wound with 1, and then I believe I don't waver that Thule Mythicin, so not exactly the best here. But let's move on. So moving on to turn 5. Turn 5, things are still looking a little dicey for the Trident Realm. It could, I could come back and win this, but we've got the Thule Mythicin charges into my giant, just looking for a little revenge. Again, the Envoy charges into the Soul Snare to make sure it's permanently on lockdown. The Kraken has a flank charge onto Nyx because I didn't really, well, I did hurt it, but I didn't waver it. It's like a 17-19, so it's pretty hard to waver. So yeah, it gets a flank charge onto Nyx. I'm not super worried, as Nyx only has 1 wound on him because Morgana had cast heal 5 onto him. So yeah, only 1 wound. I mean, it's 30 attacks, but on 5, so like 15-ish hits, and then 7-ish wounds. You're gonna need a 10, a 10 to kill me. That's not the best. This Knucker just backs off a little bit. It wanted to crab walk, but I had moved my wizard here on purpose. I'd moved my wizard here to cast the surge. So yep, that's about it. And let's move on to the, here's the end of turn shot. So like I said, perfect 10 to kill, and it's easy money. My opponent lands a ludicrous number of wounds on me and kills him off. This giant even takes wounds from the Mythicin. It's not that unlikely, as the Mythicin has like five attacks or something on 3s, so whatever. Again, the Envoy lands a wound. At least this one my opponent did after Nyx had died, so it was back up to that 75 or 0.75 chance of a wound. So I guess there's that. But yeah, I just can't get that break this game. And moving forward onto Empire of Dust turn 5, let's see what I've got. Oh, that's the other thing, is that we've got Ector here. So I guess Ector must have charged into Nyx as well. So that does make the number a little worse, because Ector's got 6 attacks on 3s, so 4-ish hits, and then crushing 2, so again down to crush 1, so 2-ish wounds. So I guess my opponent was looking for an 8 on average twice to kill me, and I do have my Nyx reroll, which I did use to try to save Nyx, and it did nothing. So yeah, my opponent just does a ton of wounds and kills me off. and then repositions. Ector looks like he's facing this way. He is not. Ector decided to back up, so facing like this. So I'm not going to be eating that ensnare next turn. So these mummies could just win the game, because I could get a front charge from this giant onto the wounded Kraken. I believe it has 4 wounds on it. It's carrying a 2-point objective. Then these giants could kill off Ector reasonably easily, and if I get that, I can then overrun into this Kraken. But let's see what I do. So here is the beginning of Empire of Dust turn 5. Over here on the left, you can see my chariots just advance forward with their 2 loot tokens. Just to mess around, I again send this giant into this Mythicon because I'm trapped by it. Because cool. Again, the disordered soul snare just sits there, and I do make a mistake here. Now, the mistake I made was that if we roll a picture back, so right now this is at the end of my opponent's turn. What I should have done is take these mummies here and just rolled over to my left, so crab walked over there, because then these mummies could have turned to face this way, right? And then both of them could have been surged. Oh no, they couldn't both be surged, right? I'm not sure, because this has to adjust its facing. Yeah, no, I could have done it. Yeah, because I can't slide down anymore. Yes, so these mummies should have slid down over here. Then these mummies turned this way and moved forward a little bit, because then I could have just gone for this very simple surge into the side of Ector, and then been trapped by where these mummies are, and then surge them the 1 inch, right? Or the 0 inch right now, to get into Ector. So I should have done that. Would have been a much better idea, but instead I attacked the Knucker because I'm dumb. And I do send this giant into the Kraken, so I could still get something going here where the mummies do kill off Ector, then overrun into the flank of this Kraken, kill it off, and break the game open. But let's see what happens. It's not what happens. So at the end of the turn, these mummies do pretty well against Ector. It looks like they did 7 wounds to him. So they need a 7 to kill, and they fail it. So yeah, these mummies do terribly, and then do manage to waver this Knucker, but it was already on like 6 wounds, so yeah, not the best there. This giant does what my giants do, which is essentially nothing, and does like 2 wounds to the Kraken. That's a nothing. And the other giant also fails to kill that Mythicon. Oh no, I think it did kill that Mythicon this time. So we'll see in a picture. Turn 6. Yeah, I did kill that Mythicon. Got him. So my opponent, making a fairly canny move, decides to drop the tokens with the Kraken here, right? So it has a token. This is a very grainy picture, but it drops the token right here. Then my opponent moves the Siren on top of the token, so now it's protected, right? I have to kill that individual. And then goes into my giant with this Kraken, because there's no overrun now where I get to the loot token. I can't move past this and this. Oh yes, and here's the other thing. Oh no, that's right. I'm sorry. This must be the end of my opponent's turn 6, because the Kraken charged into the Soul Snare and killed it off. I was like, did that Envoy kill my Soul Snare? Nah. The Kraken did. So yeah, the Kraken did that, and then positioned itself in such a way where I cannot overrun onto this loot token. And since my opponent is sitting on 3 loot tokens here, and I have basically no shooting, I will have 2 tokens while my opponent has a 2-point and a 1-point. So that's 3 points right there. I've only got 2, and then my opponent hides the 2-point on top of or under the Siren to make sure I cannot get to it, because I can't. There's no way to move past Ector here, or this Knucker. So yeah. Anyway, let's and you can see my Soul Snare does end up dying. I think my opponent. This is what happened. So my opponent hit it under the Siren, and then after his turn goes, oh, I didn't move the Siren. He did move the Siren. He just forgot about it. So yeah, it was a late night. I let my opponent take the Siren and move her over here and cast Siren's Call onto this guy, I believe. So this guy ends up being Siren's Called, so just runs over here for a second, because whatever. And I take my charges. So first off, I've got a giant charge onto this stupid Envoy. So better late than never, I guess. I get this giant onto this Kraken, I get these mummies onto this Knucker, hoping to finish it off, and then I get these mummies onto Ector, but this is in the front. So Ector is now on a few wounds. And then my Hail Mary play is that I've got 1 lightning bolt and 18 bow shots. Well, I'll end up with, or not 18, 16 bow shots. So I'll end up with 8 bow shots because I hit on a 5+, I moved, and this has stealth. So it also has cover, but that's irrelevant. So yeah, I'll be shooting into it with 8 shots on 6s and then 4 shots on 5s, hoping to just spike out and kill off this knucker. I do manage 1 or 2 wounds to it. I don't kill it though. Then I don't kill this knucker because dice aren't with me. I do 1 wound to Ector. That's not too bad. I mean, I'm hitting on 5s with rerolls. I should do more than 1 wound, but it doesn't really matter. And then I don't do anything to this Kraken. So you can see it's sitting at 5 wounds. It has regen 0 wounds. So, no, it regened 1. So I've done, my giant comes in, gets a pretty meaty roll, gets like 10 attacks, and manages 2 wounds because that's what giants do. And I get 4 wounds, I think, on this envoy, and I also fail to kill it. So I believe that is the end of the game. Yep, that's the end of the game. And yeah, it ends up with a sorry about that, guys. It ends up with a 3-2 victory for my opponent. I did make quite a few tactical mistakes here. Like I said, this is a big one. I should have gone for the double charge onto Ector. I just didn't see it at the time. And but otherwise, I don't really know what I did, what I do wrong here, because I think that Empire of Dust has a very hard matchup against Trident Realm in general, and on top of it, these dice were just not good. Now, my opponent didn't roll very well in the middle of the game, but he got the rolls that he needed and got some very good spikes at the beginning, and didn't get a disastrous double 1. So I don't know what to say about it. I think I did about the best I could. So yeah, that's the end of the game. I hope you guys liked it, and until next time, bye.